fandom. Oh my god, do we have a fandom name?
We have a name.
Just kidding, we don't.
No.
But we might get one eventually if enough people like you watch this.
We can't copyright it though, but we'll use it.
Shout out. So today we have a very special topic on our plate. It's got the mashed potatoes, it's got the gravy, it's got the meat, it's got the potatoes. Ooh, we're ready to get into it. We're hungry, and we're gonna talk about
the history of K-pop.
Yeah, the beginnings, the genesis,
the humble beginnings. Dun, 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 dun.
That was long.
But even so, it's gonna get into some stuff.
Yeah,
that,
for sure.
You know, some people may not know that we didn't know.
Yeah.
And we're gonna talk about like its connections to like Black music culture and how it all came to be.
So without further ado, so for us, I think a big part of us getting into K-pop, well, for me at least, in getting into K-pop, I like I said, I was off-put by some of the Black culture things that I saw being like interwoven into their music industry, and trying to understand why that was happening. And I think I had to do my own research to be able to kind of piece it together so that it made sense. And then when I went back to Adia and we were talking about it more, we were like, oh, that's why. So it was cool to kind of just like jump into some databases and understand more about the history of what was going on in Korea and what was going on in America, and why now too this is really taking off. Like K-pop is taking off the way it is in the United States.
Far it came, and from what was kind of super eye-opening.
Yeah.
Because it starts to make you see what the current state of that music industry is as like something even grander, something that kind of grew from absolutely nothing in a war-torn country. And even the weird connectors between like African Americans and Korean citizens, and that being a big deep connector during that time as well is super, super interesting. Like I didn't think that there would be so much actual historical like
through line
time capsules of that time to tell you about that.
It's a recent art form, which is fun to learn about because there's a lot to pull from. So I don't know how to start talking about it, because it's like it's one of those things where it comes from sadness.
It
right?
does.
So K-pop, right? It's like a lot of those things, like how musical theater is in America, right? We wouldn't have musical theater without having minstrel shows, without having slavery. So unfortunately, it does have a kind of history that is a bit darker, and we get something beautiful from it. So during World War II, I guess you could say there was like a push to integrate the military. So in America, we had segregation. Different schools for Black people, different schools for white people, different businesses that serve Black people versus white people. And so the military was the same way. During World War II, there was this kind of push to have Black and white people serve together. And when that happened, at first, I think Black people were more like the cooks and kind of the maids of the military, and mostly Black men we're talking about, were the cooks and the maids of the military. And then during this time period, they were allowed to kind of come into the forefront as the ones who were seeing active duty, which was definitely an honor thing for Black people. I feel like Black people have that.
They want a seat.
Yeah, a seat at the table, just to be seen as the same. A lot of Black people felt like, they were seen as important in this space. They were seen as important in Korea. They were just a GI, just like everybody else. And after World War II was over, a lot of these Black GIs went home, and they realized that they weren't getting the same kind of love and acceptance from their home country. There was still segregation. They were still seen as a lesser class citizen when they went back home. And so we ended up with a decent amount of Black GIs ending up choosing to stay in Korea.
And immigrating, which is something that doesn't really get talked about a lot. In my experience, at least. Because like post World War II, Korea was still dealing with being heavily occupied and imperialized at the time by Japan. Obviously with the outcome of World War II, Japan was no longer as great of a power as it was. So over time, there came a point when the Japanese occupation in Korea was no longer going to be feasible. It is very, very telling that during that entire conflict, a lot of the thing that helped to raise morale came from the influence of a lot of those Black GIs.
Yeah.
Like there was the food connection,
Yeah.
and like the sharing of food, culture, language, all of these things. Korean fried chicken.
Yeah. So we got to do a little research about the history of Korean fried chicken, because I remember that being one of the things that I was always like, we know, like, Black American people are like, that's our shit. So,
but it is bomb. Okay,
because they be popping off with the sauce.
The sauce.
They be popping off with the sauces.
It's so good. Like, I never thought about putting garlic sauce on some fried chicken, and it is so good.
Yeah.
Oh, I want it.
Y'all ate that for real. We had Korean fried chicken because I think the story goes that they were stationed there during Thanksgiving.
Yes.
And they didn't have a turkey to do a traditional Thanksgiving meal with, so they were like, okay, what do we have? And the other Korean GIs or people in the neighborhood where they were like, well, you can have some chicken. They were like, okay, bet. So they were like, we gonna fry this up. And they fried that chicken up for that Korean town, and they were like, oh, yup, that's it, because real recognize real. And this isn't to say that there weren't also fried chicken meals. I think they had like, I don't know if it was Joseon or one of the other dynasty like eras, but they had a fried chicken meal that was like written down and documented, but it didn't gain popularity.
No, they tended to boil a lot of stuff because it ends up being easier to save and keep for a longer time. So like pre-refrigeration, it kind of was the easier thing to go with, and frying things was like more involved in nature. So I think it just helped to spark the inspiration to make it like a regular and a norm during the time.
Korean fried chicken. Y'all ate that.
You literally ate that, and I will continue to eat it thanks to you.
But yeah, because of that like little melding of cultures, we have Korean fried chicken, which is now one of like the biggest like everybody knows Korean fried chicken as that's y'all Jimmy Jam. Also during this time when the GIs were stationed there were a lot of USO shows. So that's when America would kind of send their biggest acts. So their biggest musical or entertainment acts would go over there and perform and like give a show for these GIs. And it was good for boosting morale and getting everybody to like be excited for the same thing and be on the same page, like teamwork building things for them to work together as a group, which is what you need when you're, you know, in a war.
And like think big names. There's like Nat King Cole, Marilyn Monroe. Like they were the biggest stars in America at the time, going there to help boost his morale, but also at the same time introducing a certain level of pop culture to a nation that didn't have access to ours on a regular.
Right.
A lot of the music of the time that was very popular, Western side of the world, become very popular in Korea at the time.
Yeah.
When the doors are open to kind of like get access to it, how it can really like branch out,
because you don't have to speak the same language to understand art, you know. You don't have to speak the same language to understand creativity. Like I can see it and get it without fully getting it. You get it, you know. So because of that, there were a lot of bars that were open, or pubs, I guess you could say, whatever you want to call it, that had a lot of U.S. military members who were attending. And in order to make sure that they were able to be serviced or able to get the attention of the U.S. military men who had the money, since they were during a wartime, a lot of these bars started to have acts singing more Western music. They had radio stations that began playing more Western music because that's what the GIs were listening to. And so you slowly started to see this like cultural shift where more Western society was kind of opened up to Korea. And the people were kind of like, okay, we can rock with this. Like we can vibe. We vibe it.
And it like started to show, it very much like created this new layer of like joyfulness, especially like during a time when things are war torn. Like it is very important to have something to hold on to. And that was something that was very prevalent in any like videos that you see of from the time, photos where they're at those bars or at those like USO shows. You can see there's like such a nice feeling of camaraderie.
There's the energy.
It continued past that point once the war finally came to a somewhat stalemate. I wouldn't say it was a close. That wouldn't be fair to the people of either one of the countries that were highly destabilized from it. The solution being, of course, to create a demilitarized zone, so DMZ.
Right.
And creating now what is we know as North Korea and South Korea, with one being in the powers of the communist powers at the time, and then the other one being in the democracy-based powers. America's biggest base is actually located in South Korea, which some can see as problematic. But we kind of helped station a few more GIs that stayed there past that point, and then kind of did what sometimes America likes to do when they are a part of conflicts and just get the fuck out and not
pretend
really
it's
do
fine.
much. It's fine. So they had to build their country
from the ground,
ground up.
Yeah.
Relearn their language, reacclimate themselves to a new society that's based on a democratic leaning way of governing and being. And it took them quite a while, but throughout all of it, they had music.
I remember looking at this, and they said, like, yeah, we love fried chicken. Fried chicken was a big deal, but they couldn't afford the chicken or the oil in order to do that. So the Korean fried chicken thing didn't end up taking off immediately because it wasn't something that was attainable for everybody. But once they started being able to be a little bit stronger financially, it was definitely something that people were like, oh, we got the means to do this shit now. When they had these small bars popping off and having these more Western acts, they started hiring people specifically to entertain the soldiers who were in that area, right? So it became popular to have groups that were basically like cover bands, kind of covering Western songs. So they ended up learning a lot of English songs and performing a lot of English songs. And one of the most famous groups that we can talk about that ended up doing that is a group called the Kim Sisters.
I love the Kim Sisters. I
just did the intro.
I know, you're gonna let me go off on a tangent. What's crazy is I remember sitting in a film class in college and us for some reason randomly watching a clip of the Ed Sullivan Show, and I don't know why, don't ask me why, but it was the clip of the Kim Sisters' first appearance on the show. And I was like, this is super fun and super kooky. I love this. And then we never watched it again and it had nothing to do with our film class. But years later, here we are. And we started watching a video one night. And I said, oh my gosh, it's the video. And I had no idea that they were a Korean group. And that they were like the first Korean group ever to be on the Billboard charts. Ever.
They were number 7.
Number 7 on the Hot 100. That's crazy. And like,
especially in what, 1959?
1959.
1959.
My dad wasn't even born yet.
You know?
Like, and it's super, super cool. But they're not really sisters. First disclaimer. They were a group of 3 women who were multi-instrumentalists and musicians and impressionists.
Singers.
Who performed, and they got like to be broadcast on a Western stage from the Ed Sullivan Show. They became main staples on that show, which meant that they came back multiple times. If you go on YouTube right now, no sponsor, but if you go on YouTube right now, you would be able to look up the Kim Sisters and see multiple appearances on the Ed Sullivan Show, a lot of other late night shows of the time. And they are exceptional.
And it seemed like, from what we could find, that they were one of the only Asian acts that was really out. And that weren't doing anything that was like super triggering.
And they were women.
3 Asian women. Slay.
Striking a standing bass and spinning it.
And dancing.
Playing sax.
Singing. Playing sax.
It was crazy.
Talent there was absolutely unmatched, which just sets the precedent for what their standard is, I think, for performance talent. And that is something that they held to and continue to hold to, because they don't play, and we respect y'all for that.
Then they started to see like a couple more like acts like that start to pop up over time. And you could tell the distinct, like, clear line of influence that they came from. Like, even the Kim Sisters, their whole look gave very like 1960s Supremes-ish era of time. There were like a lot of other artists that came out during the time that started doing a bit more like leaning towards the doo-wop-y type of sound and things like that. And then as time started to progress in the world, but especially in Korea in the 70s, they started to definitely have their own like vibe that really connected with the counterculture way of things in the Western world that we were used to, like heavy, like Woodstocky type of vibes, the Jimi Hendrix of it all.
They had their own Bob Dylan.
They did.
I forget his name right now.
I
love him. He has a song called Streams and Rivers or something like that. He's great. But yeah, they basically had the equivalent of every Western artist you can think of throughout.
Yeah. With the same level of
that.
intense influence in the country.
Yes. Yeah.
And also the same level of
by the government.
Rocker badassness.
Yeah.
I think it's so cool.
Yeah.
Like the amount of 70s rock stars in South Korea who got arrested for marijuana possession and just smoking it in general is like swaggy. A large list.
Yeah.
Obviously, it's kind of a through line because that's kind of a staple now, but they would be kind of barred from having to be broadcasted or performing after you've been arrested. It's a whole thing. So like they spent a lot of time not being able to produce any more music and perform, but they were still and still are extremely popular
active artists.
Yeah. And they're really good.
Yeah. So some time passes, right? And Korea does kind of hit a bit of a stalemate as far as like their music innovation. I think they found the sound that they like and they kind of stick with that. They also always have traditional Korean music. They have their trot sound.
Time passes and there's kind of a stall in like a lot of the music that was being produced heavily within Korea. There obviously was still music artists who were doing their darn thing, but their most popular music at the time started to venture into like Japanese city pop and rock.
Right.
And so that kind of is what feeds through the 80s for them. And trot music obviously had a big resurgence. If you don't know what it is, look it up. It's amazing. It's usually what you sing at a karaoke. It's awesome. And then we get to like the late 80s, early 90s.
Right.
And all of a sudden the influence of these new music acts starts to shift and change a bit more to a Western lens, in my opinion.
Yeah. And we have a group pop up that is completely unlike anything that Korea has seen before, and that is Sotaji and Boys. Now, I always want to say and the Boys.
I was about to.
But it's not. It's just and Boys.
And Boys.
Just him and Boys.
Yep.
There's Boys there. There's him there. That's it.
Sotaji
and
Boys.
And Boys. Yeah, so what I liked about watching videos of Sotaji and Boys was that you could definitely see the clear influence for a lot of the K-pop rappers that we have today. Like, you can see the J-Hope, you can see the Hongjoong, like, you see...
Zico, because they're all.
Yeah, G-Drive. Like, you see the vibes where they initially pulled from, and it's so interesting that, like, decades later, we're still seeing that kind of influence come through. Sotaji is hard to swallow, not gonna lie to y'all.
Yeah.
Not gonna lie.
But I will say, I appreciate the fact that when they first showed out, everyone was like, no.
Yeah.
They were like, this is not it. This is weird. Why are they talking about things like the way the government's working against people? Like, that's not gonna work.
What I like is, even though they are a little cringy, they took the core of what hip hop is.
Yes.
And like, they were like, okay, we're gonna do this.
Yeah.
We're gonna do that core. And I have to respect that, even though they did some weird things. Like, they still did, like, the appropriative hair and some other stuff.
And definitely had one member tan on purpose.
So much tan.
Which is, like, not ideal. Do not blackfish. It is not cute. Very clear through line from Sotaji and, like, a BBD. Like, very much like, okay, this is the vibe that's starting to happen here.
Yeah.
It's clearly starting to, like, become the norm. They were not about it when they first started doing music. No one really went to support them, and then they finally debuted fully, not just on a music show. And the audience reaction was,
they loved it,
obsessed. They had never seen that level of engagement. And at the time, like, on the Western side of things, we were starting, like, we had groups for a long time.
Yeah.
And so that level of, like, fandom had become normal here, and they had not seen that yet. So there was just, like, an intensive amount of, like, engaged, loyal, supportive fans. And then they kind of did the most baller thing you could do, and they just said, we're at the top, we're gonna stop.
Yeah, they were called the Korean New Kids on the Block, which is, I mean, that says it all. You know, that's who they were. And yeah, they had endless support. Like, people, their fans were so invested, and I think that's really where in Korea, I think they realized, oh, this is a commodity.
Yes.
Like, this is something that we can monetize. And at that point, they still kind of needed it as a country, because from like, like a war-torn economic situation to being the 11th most profitable economy.
Yeah, and that jump.
That ain't nothing to snuff at, big girl. That's
that jump from cultural influence within its own country alone is, I don't know if I can name something else that has ever been anything close to that.
And a member of Sotaji is the one who owns YG.
Yes.
So that's when we see those through lines come in. Mm-hmm. That's where they're coming from, baby.
Yeah.
Everything's
connected.
Real time.
Be prepared.
Be prepared. It's going to come back around.
It's about to get crazy. But yeah, Sotaji, they were on top of the world, played a giant dome shows, had screaming multitudes of fans, and then did a press conference and said, we're done.
Never doing this again.
And these fans were left going, what else? Like, what's next?
Yeah.
What is this? And the Korean government and people who were involved in music sat there and said, oh,
yeah,
what is next?
Yeah. And they used that opening.
They did.
They used that opening
and
heavily.
They pushed it wide open. And then came
a lot of groups
after that. But all of a sudden, the need to invest in music and pop culture started to shift and change, where all of a sudden they had created like a new stipulation within the government to give at least 1% of their funds towards enhancing their pop culture and music culture. And they were like, this is needed.
And that's where these labels came from.
Yeah.
That's when we got SM. That's when we got YG. That's when we got
JYP.
That's when we got JYP. So it's crazy to see how these labels have really grown from having like a little bit of a government grant and not really being super supported and being like a real thing that people respected, into being what they are now.
Yeah. Like, there is a song by Sotaji, which if you haven't heard of them, there's a song they have called Come Back Home. It actually was covered by BTS a few years back. But
it's been covered by other groups too, I think.
Yeah, it's been covered by quite a few, actually.
It's like a staple.
And it's a great song, but it's about teenage runaways and the need to kind of like
run away from your family because of pressure and stress, but you always come back to your roots and who you are. Great sentiment.
It's a beautiful sentiment, and it actually ended up being one of their most popular songs, but it was also one of the least intensive ones in terms of counterculture that they had, because they had a lot of songs that were banned because of their like radical nature, so to speak, of the time. They didn't see teenagers rebelling and standing for their dreams and what they wanted and what they aspired to as being a go-to time. And so it was definitely very interesting to watch as they started to realize, oh, the concept of youth itself is a great selling point.
Yeah, and nowhere in the world was hip-hop like synonymous with, I guess, in their eyes, with being successful, with being, respected. So I think the older generation didn't really see like wanting their kids to align with that. And so that, of course, that emboldens youth even more. So that's when that kind of took off. And so then after this, we see the rise of K-pop groups that are kind of made from these government-funded labels. And then we see healthy songs, which healthy songs is a term for songs that are kind of made and structured with a government message in mind, to be like, hey, everybody, everything's cool. Don't worry about the issue.
A few of them, like before, where their top song at the time once was a song that was just about like the pride of Korea. And it was made to kind of just make people feel good and patriotic. And strong within their country, which I don't see there being a deep problem with. It definitely just gave, we're pushing more of a positive, solely message, and that's good for the overall group of people. But it also was like with the help and funding of their own government to help push that message for the youth especially. So when there was a new turn, it definitely shook things up a bit.
So after this, we see new artists, new groups, their stuff popping up all over the place.
And including like, so SM at the time, he was the first one to start a K-pop company,
SM Town.
SM Town. SM, funnily enough, to link it back to Black culture, obviously there, SM is obsessed with Motown.
Or the CEO of SM.
The CEO, yes. The reason it's called SM Town is because of Motown. He went to America and studied for a little bit of time and was working with a few people and became aware of Motown and started to like do some deep research and understanding of it, and has a lot of Motown memorabilia. And he decided that when he was going to come back to Korea and start this company, that he was going to base the structure of how he created music off of the Motown system, which is in-house production and music, specific systems of creating groups and music acts. And he kind of collided that with the Japanese structure at the time. Japan had started to really get into what they had.
Because jazz was big over there. They had a whole different side of Black culture that I feel like they latched onto.
But they also started to come out with their own groups, and they had a certain type of trainee system in a way that they created. And so he took the two and melded them together and pretty much created what we now know as the modern K-pop idol trainee system. Trainees obviously being people who are training to be debut as an idol. And so he came out with what is now credited as the first K-pop group, which is HOT. Hot. Hot came out the gate looking like they were on a slope. Colorful slopes. Imagine like Teletubbies, but they go skiing. The songs are like bubblegum pop.
Yeah, but the lyrics don't be given that it should be a bubblegum pop song.
It was not that. And the visuals also were very...
The music video is concerning.
It was
the music video
heavily concerning.
Because I don't know what they're about, babe. Can't tell you. Don't know. Not sure.
It felt like there was a consent issue in that video, but we'll move on.
But Hot loved to feature a white woman.
They loved a white woman.
Shout out to y'all for that.
Yes.
They said y'all will notice.
That's where it started. HOT was like a big huge deal at the time, started to like really boom their economy for especially in the music industry itself, and then all of a sudden they realized, oh, we gotta start making these groups. And so you started to see JYP and YG pop up, of course YG being a former member of Soteji and Boys. And they start popping up and start creating these groups and creating their own models of their training system, and they also partner with the Korean broadcasting systems and the Korean government to help also boost this. And now you have something to garner the attention of the Korean youth with like acts like Shinhwa.
They're known. They also have like NSYNC vibes, but they're known for their Perfect Man performance. If you guys have seen, a couple other groups have done it too, but BTS did it, and it was like a moment for Jimin. I think it's one of his most watched fan cams of all time. He has orange hair. He's getting
down.
Perfect Man.
It's great. Perfect Man's great. Then of course, we've already spoken about Boa.
Love Boa. Love Boa down.
Immaculate.
But remember we watched that video where like one of her background dancers had a huge afro wig for like
and I was like, it's obviously a wig, and also why? No one else had it. No one had the hair.
Unnecessary. Because she was giving Korean Britney realness, and then we're just like this big hair just dancing behind her.
And this is also the time when it started to become like, oh,
it's a bit like we're using it as a bit instead of
like the influence was there, but the influence was giving appropriative as opposed to appreciative. Because at the time especially there wasn't a deep, and even sometimes now there isn't a deep precedent on like a part of the trainee system being also in education. On not just like music in its most stable form, on the history of it, even the histories of the connection with that music in your own country. All of these things would have been really important to make it so that, we probably would have noticed and recognized that like us wearing like the dreads was unneeded, or like, I don't know, but it's unnecessary. But like you can create your own culture and highlight your own without causing a bit of harm or hindrance to another. And I think that over time I think it's starting to become clear as you start to notice as the years have passed, there's a lot more involvement of African American and just Black talent in general.
Yeah, we're seeing background dancers, we're seeing them in the studio, we're seeing Black producers, there's definitely more of an influence directly. I don't know if those people are having these conversations with these artists. I don't know about that. But you can see they're in the rooms. And as these groups get bigger, like you'll see as these groups get more well known, especially internationally, that they kind of do pull back on like the use of the grills and the use of like they pull back on the bullshit.
Yeah.
Because
it's unneeded. And
it's not necessary.
And truthfully, the international audience itself is also like has a bit more, not always clearly so, but a bit more awareness to some of those things if you have that culture be so prevalent in your own. And so they'll be the ones to clock that very quickly and be like, oh, that's not it. But I think that the connections between even like the music styles in K-pop that become extremely popular, even the inclusion of a rapper in an idol group itself comes from like the inclusion of rappers in our groups, like going back to like a New Edition and all those things, or the breakdown of even a Temptation song and how there's a spoken word randomly in the middle of it. Do listen to Silent Night by the Temptations. It's great. Merry Christmas doll. But
is that your serve? Are you giving your serve mid-episode?
Yes, a little bit. But it's like all of those things have a clear direction that they came from.
Right.
That most people don't know. Even New Kids on the Block, which is what people connect Soteji and Boys to, and everyone else. It's still like
Black influence.
Extremely large. But New Kids on the Block was shaped after New Edition. So
I do think it's interesting because it feels like it does feel genuine. Like their interest in Black music does feel genuine. And I feel like it is like, I think last time you said Han, right?
Yes.
So Han, not Han of Stray Kids.
Oh my gosh.
But Han, the term itself is like, I mean, we call it generational trauma.
Yeah, that's what.
But their way of explaining it is way more beautiful.
Yeah.
But it's like this deep yearning for a loss of connection to your history, but also like the suffering of your ancestors. I don't know how to explain it.
It's like the suffering of long past having such a large influence on
who you are,
it is, and who you are in the current and in the future. And I think that becomes a very, very common topic spoken about in a lot of not just K-pop songs, but in K-dramas, in a lot of their movies. Like there is a consistent connector to that feeling of the people of Korea, especially because people disregard the fact that in the solution of the end of that war, as we like to call it the end, but the stalemate of that war was that families got ripped apart and have no communication and also no information on what happened to a lot of people who went missing or lost their lives. Like they still have not been like reconnected with the remains of a lot of the dead, and it's causes a lot of anger and strife and deep feelings. And I think that a lot of minorities would understand that feeling, but especially Black people, because there is a very clear through line of generational trauma from like the antebellum South, slavery in general. It is very, very, very well documented, fraught. We feel it regularly, but it also is part of the reason that we have been the creators and instigators of what
because you had to create your own culture
Yeah.
because it keeps getting stolen and you don't know.
It is, and truthfully, creators of American culture that we know of.
Right.
All those big things that people think about when they think about America, a lot of them are the things that we created, whether musically, artistically, fashion-wise, food, like all these different elements that connect to that. And I think that that's so interesting that there's that one could be sad thing that we have in common that actually helped us create the platform to really express ourselves.
Yeah. But it's cool how it goes together. And I will say, like, I do enjoy, and I think most, even if like you're like, oh, I don't know about K-pop, like when you see something performed really well and you can recognize the style. Like I know a lot of K-pop artists will cover Michael Jackson songs, or they'll cover Jackson 5 songs, or songs by Motown artists. I mean, they'll usually cover Black artist songs, like traditional Black artist songs. And when it's done well, you can always be like, that's that shit. Like, you always know, like, hey, he's popping off. And you can't even be mad because you're like, listen. And to be so fair, I don't know that there's any American artists that we have that we can say are popping off in the same way, especially right now, in the way groups are. We don't have a group right now that, I mean, they're going to bring back the Backstreet. Okay. Like, I don't care. I'm sorry. So, like, quote me. It's hard because, and like I said, I have the fanSERVice machine. It wasn't my time. Sorry. But, like, I don't think they can still give the same level of dance, the same level of performance that a lot of these K-pop groups do. They just can't.
And paying homage a lot of the time, even if it's, like, not always in the most politically correct way, one thing I can always see is, like, oh, that influence from that person, you are enacting it very, very well.
You felt that.
Like, you felt that in your body. Like, I can watch a Blackpink performance and go, I can see the TLC through line there. I can see from all these other groups, like, oh, there's obviously a connector to Destiny's Child here. There's a connector to this person. Like, I can see that you did the homework. Right. It's just that there's usually a certain part of the homework that is not there. But that's the issue with having a homogenous society a lot of times.
So moving on after that, then we get into our second gen of K-pop. And this is when I think the groups become a little bit more fleshed out. They're a little bit more like, they know what their meaning is, and they know their type. Because I think one thing that we'll see too, like with the creation of the girl groups especially, is that all girl groups kind of have this category that they have to fall into, right? Like, you're either a crazy girl group, you're a sexy girl group, or you're a cool girl group. And you cannot mix and match. Like, you need to be, which is what I kind of liked about New Jeans, is that they were given all of it, you know? Like, they can be hot, but they can also just be like, oh, we're just in the car, we're doing our little thing. And then, oh, no, we got our schoolgirl uniforms on, we're cute.
And you know, like, they
were... I mean, they were, but
they still are.
But it was fun. Like, I like that. So I like that now we're not feeling as stuck in those boxes. Yeah. But back then, in the second gen of K-pop, you could definitely see that. What gen are we in now? 4?
We're in 5.
Oh, shit.
5.
Shit. So there's more to cover.
You started to see, like, kind of the staples of what became culturally known as the world of K-pop, and became like, oh, this is how this industry is working, were very much established in second gen. Now we're in, like, this is how training systems work, this is how we have these idols be created, this is kind of the structure in which we keep these idols in, and it was a profitable system. You came out with heavy hitters.
Biggest of all is Big Bang.
Bang. YG came out the gate with Big Bang. And they were a 5-member group at the time. And they were, I guess they're credited as being one of the first fashion forward K-pop groups. Shout out to G-Dragon. He knows how to wear a fit and a shoe. And so, and their whole thing was like merging together, like, I mean, K-pop's whole entire system is this idea. When you think of a K-pop song, it is an industry and not a genre. But when you think about a K-pop song, it's the merging of a lot of different music styles. Like, sometimes all in the same song. And so you'll go from like an EDM to a hip-hop breakdown to like a slow little ballad bridge, back to pop, and then back to the hip-hop breakdown at the end, and then EDM, and then dance break. And you're like, oh, dance. So a lot of the consensus for people is that there's a lot of noise in a K-pop song. But like,
and certain groups are noisier than others.
Yes. But like, also that's part of the fun of it, because a lot of it's supposed to be this positive, affirming, like, music style, with the visuals included. And Big Bang did that in spades, and they were very, very good at it. There was also 2NE1 at the same time, who were female groups, who were doing the same thing, very rap heavy as well. And like Wonder Girls.
And the Wonder Girls. That's JYP. JYP and the Wonder Girls. I'm sad about them.
I am too.
They were actually really great.
They were very good.
Love the Wonder Girls.
I love the Wonder Girls.
2PM. It has one of my faves, Lee Jun-ho. Lee Jun-ho, you guys probably know as an actor now. He was in King the Landa.
King the Landa.
Who's the King of the Land? It's a Netflix original. We're not sponsored, but go watch it anyway. I love Lee Jun Ho. Always support Lee Jun Ho. Shout out to his cats. I love him. Okay, I don't care. I'm sorry.
And you know
I
what?
love his closet. I love him. I love him down.
Yeah. No, 2PM, who had a giant moment as well. A lot of the groups that were banging out at the time were a lot of boy groups.
Yeah.
And then you started to see like the girl groups start to come out. Girls' Generation debuted at the time. Girls' Day, 4 Minute. I love 4 Minute because they were like kind of crazy and kind of like hardish, and I liked that. And they were just like swinging.
Yeah, we also had Super Junior.
Yeah.
Epic High, which is always credited as a big inspiration for BTS. Stray Kids always credits them.
Epic High was kind of a rap trio.
Yeah.
And does include Tableau, who is a American-born idol. Which you started to see that start to pop up in second gen too, where you started to have foreign idols who weren't just from Korea and couldn't just be Korean. They started having Chinese idols, Thai idols, Taiwanese idols, and American born and Canadian.
And
Australian.
I don't know if they were in this gen, but
Not
we do
really,
have
but
now we have a ton of
now.
Australian idols. Oh, Beast. We have Beast. We have TVXQ.
TVXQ, who famously had one of the first like big court cases against their company, and that's part of the reason that we have a new 7-year contract for idols. They used to call them slave contracts. They kind of were, very much were. And it was hard to get out of them. They did not really protect their artists,
which is sad because these are like contracts that kids are signing up for to learn how to dance and
then
sing.
their parents send them away to like train for X amount of years without exact hope and guarantee they're going to debut and be successful. With that fight amongst those couple of members who no longer stayed in the group, with creating the new system for those contracts for those artists. So shout out to y'all for doing that. I know that was hard, and you guys definitely got blacklisted, so that sucks, and I think that's bullshit.
But you set the precedent.
But you did the damn thing.
And we have FX.
FX.
And of course Shiny. I'm not going to sing Replay again because that's my first song. Oh, you're going to sing it? But they are notable in this gen for kind of setting a baseline as well as far as how we're going to look at mental health going forward in K-pop. Because when you're a young person and you're put in the public spotlight like this, it's normal to need some kind of mental health help, assistance, a break. And a lot of these artists in this gen, I don't think they knew enough. Those in charge, I don't think they knew enough, or that they wanted to, or they felt they could afford to give these kids a break. And so they did it. And so we did have trigger warning, but we did have suicides. We did have instances of people harming themselves, having to leave groups, people being blacklisted. Top from Big Bang was blacklisted. So there's definitely things that come up where these artists weren't always forever with the group they debuted with. And sometimes for things that now aren't even seen as a big deal. So it's, there's definitely a interesting history with that ties through when we see how our artists are treated today, especially your faves.
Yes, and second gen definitely also like opened the door of how fan service came to be.
Yeah.
Like how truly living for your fans became the norm for these idols, and it was very locked in at the time. Now there's a bit more nuance and flexibility, but I definitely feel like that pressure and that level of scrutiny and awareness of these artists without there being a lot of awareness of the people behind it, what caused them to be great and amazing performers, but also it didn't leave a lot of room for us to see them as people. And I think that now there's a shift happening because we live in a very overly aware time, and we have like the internet, which gives us too much access at times. But also it can be the positive of the fact that now we have a bit more awareness of the people.
Support them, give them space.
And space.
This is Adia's kind way of saying fuck off.
He's
like, hey, fuck off.
I was gonna wait to do that in the next episode.
Give him a minute.
But no, I just think that second gen made some amazing, exceptional pioneers of K-pop. They really sat there and they like burst through and they like laid an amazing foundation for what would happen globally for K-pop and what it could be.
Yeah.
And then the next gen, which we will get into later, we know what happened there.
Okay. So before we keep going, you're on a roll now. Before we keep going, Adia, give us your serve of the week.
My serve of the week. Ooh. My serve of the week this week is going to be, I'm going to choose...
Slay.
What is your serve of the week?
Okay, so I'm piggybacking off of what Adia said. My serve is also so that's all for today.
Yes.
Thank you for listening, tuning in. If you like us, email us. If you hate us, email us, dude. Totally do that. You can like us on Spotify, like us on whatever streaming service platform you are listening to us on, so that more people can know that we hit. We have a Twitter.
Yeah.
We have a Threads.
Yes.
We have an Instagram. We're going to post reels. We have an amazing content creator who's going to be helping us create reels.
Yes.
TikTok.
Yeah.
We got all the things, so just look for your girls.
Yes, those socials we found below this video, and if you're on Spotify, they will be all in the bio at your leisure. So please feel free to interact with us. We will be giving you a lot of great content on all those platforms.
And if you're listening to us and you're like, these bitches sound hot, I want to see them, we got a YouTube too.
Yep.
Shout out. Check us out. It's good.
Yep.
And that's it.
All right.
That's all.
We will definitely be seeing you next time.
Bye.
Bye. Bye.